I'm Hunter Thompson, and welcome to the Cash Flow Connections Real Estate Podcast. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Today, we've got Victor Menasce here, who has been in the real estate business for more than 25 years, got a background in development, both in the United States and in Canada, has been in the game for a long time, but has been full-time in real estate since 2009. He actually just announced they are coming up on their 2,500th episode, which is absolutely insane. Usually someone's celebrating their 25th episode, so 2,500th is incredible. So Victor, welcome to the program.
Well, great to be here.
So I want to start off by talking a little bit about your background and the types of real estate deals that you have done before. And then I'd like to hear more about, what you're looking at in today's climate and then going into 2025.
Absolutely. Well, my pathway into the world of real estate was definitely not the normal career path. I started my career as an electrical engineer, designing microprocessors back in the day, both telecom and semiconductor companies, both private and public companies. Did 5 M&A deals, 1 IPO, a couple of different startup companies. So really spent the bulk of my early career in the tech industry. Some of the most fun I've had, for sure, because you're working with crazy smart people from all over the world, and held both design roles as well as senior executive roles in a variety of different companies. And as it turns out, turned a lot of what I learned in that space into the world of real estate investing. Many of the skills were transportable, only it was easier in real estate because, a chip design is a complex thing, and verifying that, making sure that it works, is a whole lot more complex quality assurance exercise as compared with, say, building an apartment building. They're not in the same scale. But those skills were very transportable. So as you mentioned, I moved into the world of real estate investing in 2009. I was on my 18th trip to Tokyo in a year and a half. I was going there every 2 weeks, and it was just burning me out. That 13-hour plane ride from Toronto to Narita Airport and the 12-hour time zone change every few days was just killer. And so I decided to take a left turn and move into the world of investing. And if you might remember, there was something going on in real estate in 2009 that made it a great time to be playing offense and a terrible time to be playing defense, but it was a wonderful time to start.
For sure. And, I started in 2011, so I know what it was like, which is basically all your family members think you're insane. And there's this tailspin that's taking place. And now, are you located in Canada? Or are you located in the United States?
I'm based in Ottawa, Canada.
Okay.
But our business today, I'm one of the principals at Y Street Capital. And we are part of the team is based in Canada. Part of our U.S. headquarters is actually in Salt Lake City. And we're active. We're mostly U.S. based. We're active in 9 states across the U.S. We're land developers, developers in general, not just land. We develop apartments, senior housing, flex multi-tenant industrial, storage, and we have a few thousand acres of land as well that we're developing.
And do you operate these assets, or do you?
We do.
Okay, cool. So in let's say the senior living industry, which obviously is extremely operationally intensive, what does a typical project look like for you? You go from ground up and then you own it for a while. Love to learn more.
So the last project we did was in 2021. That was a senior housing project, assisted living and memory care. We actually won the Senior Housing News Architectural Design Award nationally in the U.S. for that project. And the thesis for that project is, look, in most major markets, senior housing today is overbuilt. There's excess vacancy, occupancies are fairly low. And that is a lot of building in anticipation of this wave called the baby boomers. Because the baby boomers, the oldest baby boomer today is 78 years old, something like that. And the average age of people entering assisted living is 83. So the wave hasn't hit yet. It will, but it hasn't hit yet. So we expect that there will be a shortage of supply in a few years, but we're not there yet. Many of the facilities that have been built were built with this big box concept. I call it a hospital with a better paint job. And we felt that if you've been living in a detached single family home, the last thing you want to do is be up on the 6th floor of a mid-rise building that really has an institutional feel to it. So we designed a campus of residential care homes. Now, the problem with residential care homes is they're too small and the numbers don't work. So you want the intimacy of a boutique facility, but you want the economies of scale of a big box facility. And by building a campus, we're able to build kind of that best of breed where you've got both of those happening. And the key, like you said, is having the right operator. And we would not have gone into that project if it didn't start with the right operator, because that is the key. It happens to be a service business, by far a service business that happens to have a real estate component to it, but it's first and foremost a real estate business. I mean, a service business.
And so did you partner with an operating group there in
We
that
did.
scenario? Okay, I understand.
We
That makes
did.
a lot
Yeah.
more sense. The
Yeah.
reason I was asking is it's a very different skill set, different employees, different, mindset.
100%.
Yeah, in this particular in that industry, the people that are very successful in private equity, they tend to struggle in senior living because of a very different personality type that's yeah, it's a very difficult to navigate industry, but if you can pull it off, obviously the tailwinds are absolutely massive, and the investor appetite, though it was definitely changed in the wake of COVID, I think that in a couple of years it will come back, and when it does come back, it will be coming back with a vengeance because it's the most straightforward play of all time. It's like, look, this demographic shift is so massive, but at the end of the day, the details matter. And those details in this case are massive because of the operational components. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Absolutely. And the key to getting the right leadership in that space is finding folks that have come out of a very regulated environment. Sometimes they
Yes.
might be registered nurses,
Yeah.
pharmacists, folks like that are used to being in that, that heavy environment. So the adaptation to senior housing is actually a smaller step if you're familiar with living in that world. And it's a key of finding the right both skills and attributes. We're busy training someone right now because in order to scale that business, we need more leaders that can create the culture, hire the staff, build the facilities, and so on. And we can't build until we actually have those folks ready in place and ready to go.
Makes sense. All right, let's keep rocking here. So I'd love to learn more about what you're looking at right now. Those are some cool things you've done in the past, and I
Yeah.
asked some prying question because I'm interested. But now looking forward, what are you doing in 2025? We've all heard the potential for the opportunity that's going to take place. Do you agree with that? And if so, where?
We tend to look at special situations. For example, we would not, let's say, go build an apartment complex in Atlanta because Atlanta is growing as a thesis. That's just far too general. Or Charlotte, or pick, whatever name you want. It's got to be a much more specific situation than that. So, for example, right now, today, probably in the next 6 months, we'll be breaking ground on a project up in Spokane, Washington. That particular project is going to be an active adult product. There's no shortage of 3-story woody walk-ups, but if you are downsizing from a detached home, nobody wants to carry their groceries up 3 flights of stairs. I don't care who you are, especially if you're downsizing. So you want a mid-rise building with elevators, you want amenities rich, you want all of the values associated with the active adult segment of the market as a springboard. It's a gap filler between downsizing from a detached home and into that more expensive, service rich, independent living offering, which includes meals and all these other things, transportation and so on. But for the active adult, they don't want that. And they certainly don't want to pay the premium for that. Many of those facilities are also attached to assisted living and memory care and so on, that entire continuum of care. People don't want to move into an old folks home. That's just not their vision. Nobody has that vision. They often do it out of necessity. It's often event driven. Sometimes people go into IL because they're tired of cutting the grass and they're tired of cooking meals, so they choose that. But oftentimes the active adult product, of which, by the way, there's very little nationally. There's only 73,000 units in the entire nation, which is a drop in the bucket when you consider the demographic. It's not even in all 50 states. It's only in like 41 states. So it's a fast growing segment. There's a premium to a market rate apartment, but it's a different model. It's a different product. So when I was in the tech industry, I was in the world of product design. And I believe in designing a product for a very specific customer. This is no different. I'm a product designer at heart. And when we design a product, we're designing it for a specific customer. So that's one example, one project that we're doing right now. We're very active in land development as well. For
You know
example,
what?
we're doing a
I'd
very,
like to ask you a clarifying
yeah,
question on that. Most
yeah,
of the listeners of this program may not be, they're certainly not trained up on the nuances of land development. When you hear the term
yeah,
land development, some people are like, what are you talking about? It's land. Like, what else? So can you explain what that means?
sure. If you start at one end of the spectrum, I call it the land use multiplier. So dirt is dirt. I think we would all agree. If the thing is, what is it used for? What is it entitled for? And what's the supply demand situation? So you might have an acre of agricultural land that would value at somewhere between 3 to 10,000 an acre, pretty much anywhere in the country. If you're growing wheat on it, maybe it might be at the higher end of the spectrum. If you're just grazing cattle, it might be at the lower end, but it's in that range. If that land all of a sudden you could put a residential subdivision on it, now you might go from say 3,000 an acre to a couple of 100,000 an acre. If you can put a 40-story building on it, it might be several million an acre, but it's all the same dirt. So, what is it about that? It's about the entitlement, it's about getting the services to the property. So, when we talk about land development, it's all of the planning, it's all of the land use, entitlement, working with the jurisdiction, whether it's the county, the city, the local community association, to get those entitlements, and then of course get the zoning, the site plan approval, all of the things that are necessary to bring that project to fruition.
I think that, so you've been through, I guess, the tail side of the 2009 cycle, which of course wasn't just up and to the right. It feels like that when you look at the chart, but you and I both know there was like 3 or 4 years of you didn't know which way the chart was going to go, 2009, 10, 11, 12. I mean, maybe you did or I did, but it was difficult living it. Every day seemed like a new negative economic data point. Um, in 2022, obviously things changed again dramatically.
Mhm.
Just for context, as a developer, did you experience some of that distress? Did the change in interest rates materially change your business, or were you sitting on the sidelines? Would love to learn more.
We definitely paused some projects because the numbers didn't work all of a sudden. So we definitely put some projects on pause. We never got upside down or anything like that, but we said, you know what, this doesn't make sense right now. So, in fact, that project in Spokane, we put it on pause. We had another one in Louisiana. We put it on pause. We had another one in Denver, which we put on pause. So we resurrected the Spokane project. The original thesis for that Spokane project was as a mid-rise tower market rate.
Hmm.
And when we reconceived it, we said, all right, we're getting to the point where the numbers work again. They were okay. They weren't fantastic. And what we learned is that okay just wasn't good enough. So we in fact reconceived, redesigned the project, not a major redesign, but we changed the amenities and so on, stuck with the same basic build concept, realized what needed to change. For example, we had a swimming pool, but for an active adult product, that really needs to be a year-round indoor swimming pool. So we
Hmm.
designed a building around the swimming pool and things like that in order to really better position the product for that specific market and for that client base. So yeah, we certainly did, and we pay very close attention to what's happening in the marketplace, both cost wise, rents, and so on. A lot of folks over the last couple of years, especially in the value add space, many of them weren't able to complete their value add projects, but the increase in rents wallpapered over the improvements that they were hoping to make. In a lot of cases, they ended up upside down because they were hoping to do a cash out refinance on completion, only to find that there was no path. And so you're seeing a lot of distress today in the multifamily space with folks that underwrote those projects with bridge debt and all of a sudden had no path to getting into permanent financing. So it's a turbulent market still, and I think it's going to be for another 12 to 24 months. You have major cities, great markets: Austin, Texas, Nashville, Houston, Dallas, that are today saturated with oversupply. There's been a ton of completions,
Yep.
and it's going to take a good 24 months for that new product to absorb. And hopefully there isn't a ton more completions that's going to continue downward pressure. But we're going to go through a bit of a cycle on that as well.
That's why I'm excited to have this conversation with you because
Right.
my background is buying acquired assets that already exist. Your background, you've done a lot, but development is kind of the bread and butter.
Right.
So I want to talk to you because obviously I only invest in Phoenix, but I've invested all over. But the reason I like Phoenix is it's nothing new. Population growth, job growth, it's extremely attractive. You can just Google this and find it on the top of most charts and developers can too. And so because of that, developers have developed in Phoenix and it's relatively easy to develop in Phoenix. It's easy to develop in some of these Texas markets. From your perspective, when you see an oversupplied market, let's talk about Texas, let's talk about Florida, let's talk about Arizona. When I think about 2 years of potentially being oversupplied, to me as someone who's buying assets that where that's the case, or at least that headwind is there, with 5 year fixed rate debt, it doesn't really bother me very much. And it's more like an opportunity to buy a distressed product that I'm very confident in 4 years will trade at a very compelling market and a compelling multiple because development has basically fallen off the face of the earth in all of these major markets. Number one,
Well, let's talk about your market because I have some familiarity with Maricopa County.
yeah,
And of course, this is an area where, the city sprawls so far that the value of property inside the loop is really gone up. If you're outside the 101 loop, there is a market difference in value because people want to be closer to the center. There are opportunities. There are absolutely opportunities. Now, if you think back to the post 2008 situation, if you were active at all in Phoenix in those days, the number of foreclosures that were happening in Maricopa County was just eye-watering. I mean, it's just the number of auctions they were holding per day at 101 Jefferson Street on the courthouse steps in 112 degrees sun. I mean, it's just the stuff of legends. And then layer on top of that, if you remember, Sheriff Joe he was trying to enforce immigration rules, which eventually got struck down by the courts. But in the meantime, about 200,000 folks left the Phoenix market, never to return. So you had a bifurcated market where you all of a sudden had a very high vacancy in a number of the C class and D class properties and no path to getting those rented. There were $99 move-in specials in those days. And so then the question in my mind is, in this current cycle, what's going to happen in Phoenix? Because, of course, Phoenix is not one market. It's like 27 municipalities, right? So I take a more of a hyper-local perspective. If I was to do something in the Phoenix market today, I would be asking questions like, what's happening within 2 light rail stops of Arizona State University? That's interesting. I'd be asking, what's happening at South Mountain? Are there opportunities to do multifamily close to golf courses and things like that would be, retain their value? I wouldn't be necessarily going for a value add on McDowell near the airport, which is never going to be a great area.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, of course. Um, are you doing any projects in Phoenix? Are you looking in
We
Phoenix
are
right
not right now. We are
now?
not. We are not active in Phoenix right now at all. But I
Interesting.
do know the mark. I have done things in Phoenix in the past.
It sounds like it. That's good to
Yeah.
hear. Okay, so let's transition. So you've seen ups and downs. You've paused projects. You've also, I'm sure, made quite a bit of money. The timing of this is just can't be overstated. It's a very good time to start buying real estate in 2009. And also, you've created a lot of value by developing ground up, which is also to many people, that's a risk off strategy. We're going to force the value by taking it from nothing to something. What can be more valuable than that? Talk about some of the mindset as a developer and kind of what you've seen and the bumps and bruises along the way. And, especially if the rise in interest rates impacted you and your business. Would love to learn more, especially for people that are listening that maybe haven't been through some of those challenges.
If there was one word of advice when it comes to development is if you're going, the timelines are very uncertain. Doesn't matter what the city tells you they're going to do. You're going to experience moving goalposts. The rules are going to change. A new staff member is going to come in because someone ends up on maternity leave or whatever. And that new person's going to give you a completely different perspective on what needs to happen. And so what you thought might take 3 months could take 2 years. And if you've got the meter running on a bridge loan, that could get painful. So make sure that if you're acquiring land and you're undertaking these projects, you do it with either little to no debt. We have made that mistake, by the way. So I'm speaking from experience. Experience is a euphemism for having made mistakes. So we have experience. And today, when we acquire land, we acquire all cash. That way we can handle a delay. And we have experienced delays on some major projects. Moving goalposts, I can't overstate that enough. It's one of those things that you will experience, and it's frustrating, but it only makes sense if the value potential is there. Now, for example, we're doing a project right now on the edge of Colorado Springs. It's 1,783 acres. So it's a big project. The perimeter of the property, 7 miles.
Whoa.
We bought the dirt for 23 cents a square foot. Now, that's not a bad entry point. Post annexation, post entitlement, that land should value between $4 to $5 a square foot. That's a reasonable lift. Once the infrastructure's in, shovel ready, probably between $7 and $8 a square foot. So there's a lift every step along the way, and we haven't even talked about the value of the improvements, right? So we're just talking land at this stage. That property will eventually be north of 6,000 homes, retail, commercial, industrial, schools, police, fire. It is a large master plan community. So this is one of those things that is a multi-year project. It's probably a 15 to 20-year project.
Yeah.
Of course, there's going to be an economic cycle in the middle there, if not 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So if you're not planning for that, you're dreaming. Right?
Interesting. So have you worked on one of those master plan communities before? Obviously, there's some big ones, and we were just looking at a deal in Buckeye in Phoenix. That is one of the largest. It's near one of the largest master plan communities in America, but it's just getting started. It's a multi-decade type of plan. Would love to learn more about that. Have you been involved in one of those before?
We have not. In fact, we had done smaller projects, and when this one landed in our lap, we were initially dismissive of it. We said, it's too big, it's too complex, it's too fill in the blank. And we actually let it go. And it took us took me a couple of weeks just to wrap my mind around it and say, you know what, this is just like add a zero. It's not that different. It's the same process. Yeah, there's more steps. We went through an extensive due diligence process. So that project, before we committed major dollars, could have died many, many times on the operating table, but it didn't. And we succeeded in raising the capital, attracting the right partners, passing due diligence. And so here we are today.
Pretty cool. All right. What would be some of the guidance you have for some of the young real estate entrepreneurs that are out there that are, let's say this is the first podcast they're listening to, and they're like, where should I go? Who should I listen to? Where should I go for guidance and information?
The key, let's talk philosophically, because one of the things that I often hear people say is, well, I need more knowledge. And so they talk about taking a course, or, maybe I'll go to a land development course. There's a great one at Cornell University, and there's, and that's awesome. But if access to information was really the differentiator, then anyone with access to Google should be a billionaire. And so clearly that's not the ticket, right? Then you've got the mindset crowd out there that will tell you that, you need to develop some emotional fortitude, or, your mind, you've got limiting beliefs, or whatever it might be. And that's important. But if that were the case, then anyone who's been to a Tony Robbins event should be a billionaire. And so clearly that's not the ticket either, right? In my experience, what is the differentiator is to get in the right environment. If you and to get around the people that are doing this, whatever it is, fill in the blank, on a world-class level. If you want to be a world-class figure skater, go hang out with world-class figure skaters. If you want to, be a world-class developer, hang out with other world-class developers. That environment, what might be foreign today, becomes normal. It's an immersive process. Nobody learned how to swim by reading a textbook by the side of the pool. You had to get in the water. It's the same. You have to get in the water and you have to get in the environment where what may seem foreign becomes normal. And it's immersive learning, the same way you learned English. You weren't seated at a desk at 2 years of age with a textbook on how to speak English. You learned it in an immersive way. It's exactly the same.
I couldn't agree more with that. And it's pretty wild. Like you give those examples where you'd be hard pressed, man. If your five friends have $100 million, you're going to be plugging away at that figure sometime soon. Now it's hard to get those friends, but like, what would you have to do to get those friends? Start doing that stuff. And then all of a sudden you're going to have those friends and we know what happens next. It's pretty remarkable. You have very few expectations to that being a true north. Find
Absolutely.
out who you need to be hanging out with and what you'd have to do to get their attention. Start doing those things and surrounding yourself by that. And by the way, there's different ways to shortcut that stuff. Like sometimes you're going to be able to do a favor for someone, but sometimes you doing the favor might take too much time, their time. Like maybe the favor's worth something, but you don't have enough skills to make it worth their time on a time per favor basis. So sometimes you got to pay. Sometimes you got to get pay to get in the right room, this, that, and the other thing. And I've done everything. There was a time where I had all the time in the world, very little skills. It was very difficult to attract people. Now I've got quite a bit of skills. I can get some high caliber friends very, very quickly. So, and by the way, this is an example. Having a podcast, having a platform, I can reach out to people such as yourself and, get a free hour of consulting myself and give it away to my listeners. And this is the way that I play the game. So listen, Victor, I really appreciate you coming on, man. Before we jump off though, let the listeners know how they can learn more about you, your firm, your podcast, etc.
Well, I'm the host of the Real Estate Espresso podcast, like the Italian coffee. It's a daily show, 7 days a week. The weekday edition are just me. These are solo episodes where we go into what's happening in the world of real estate investing, macroeconomics. We do deep dives on things that are often out, may not be on your radar. And one of the things I've discovered, and I'm not trying to do this, but oftentimes I'll report on things on the podcast and I'll read about it 3 to 6 weeks later in the Wall Street Journal. And it just happens over and over and over again. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just paying really close attention. You could do it too. But love to have you as a listener. Real Estate Espresso podcast, 2,500 episodes in, which I can't believe it. We're at that point, but continuing to do this, it's a labor of love for sure. Our development company is Y Street Capital, the letter Y, streetcapital.com. And we're active across the US and Canada. And love to connect with you that way as well.
Thanks a bunch, Victor. We'll link to that in the show notes page. Thanks again.